Some of the most inspiring guests we've had on Full Frame have turned their personal struggles and trauma into educating and advocating for others. They've championed causes like prison reform, racial justice, and an end to gun violence. These individuals have made their work their life's mission, motivating people worldwide to embrace their causes. Antonio Fernandez, or Tony, once known as King Tone, rose to prominence as the leader of the Latin Kings, one of the largest and most notorious street gangs in the United States. He served over a decade in federal prison, spending 3 years in solitary confinement, where he had time to reflect on his life while coming up with a plan to reconnect with society. After serving his time, Tony became an influential advocate for social change, addressing the issues of gang violence and urban poverty. You did solitary confinement for a time, and there's this great quote about this form of punishment. It's from many years ago. Solitary confinement is too terrible a punishment to inflict on any human being, no matter what his crime. Hardened criminals in the men's prisons, it is said, often beg for the lash instead. It's called no-touch torture. Is that a good way to describe it?
It's if you never, I heard people, I want to be by myself, or I want to pray, lock yourself in the closet. Well, let's go to this. America got a big test of how much it wants to be alone and be home with their family and kids during the coronavirus. We've seen parents and mothers and fathers scream, no more, tap out. I said I wanted to be home more than work, but I was totally wrong. We don't want to say that because we were all going crazy because we had to be with our kids. We had to be with, everything was where we were, our family. And it drove us crazy, right? But we still loved it that we wasn't alone. That's the difference. But when they do that madness and you're alone, the only family you got is your mind. The only historical value you have, if you fell in that hole, what did I do so wrong, right? That's the first thing you do. You have a pity party. What else could you do in the dark by yourself? And then after you realize that don't work no more.
Tony works tirelessly to provide guidance, support, and mentorship to individuals who face the challenges of behavioral issues.
245 times. You will give him a clean urine 245 times. The 246 you put dirty, he will lock you up. And he did a bid, and a real bid.
What about these kids? You must stay in touch with them. What are some success stories for you?
Well, success is some that have to go do 20 years in the feds, but I trained them how not to train 20 years into a lifetime. That you could hope for them 20 and come home back like I did, and Buddy Love did, and Sean did. But also those that are going in the street, we could give them the hope already. You taste something that I taste. Now, do you want to spend 32 years like I did to find out the answer, or you want to cheat and learn it too? And they go, okay, Tom, we see what you're saying. And then I marry them with a brother that takes them out to prison and meets them at the gate. It's called Meet 'em at the Gate. So he goes home with a big brother. And that's the dream, right? To have a big brother when you're lost and you need somebody to bring you back. So that's my dream, that we give that opportunity to every big city.
You have to look at your life and say, I could have gone in this direction. Instead, I chose this one. If you'd gone in that direction, would I be talking to you today?
No, I'll probably be in ADX during the rest of my life, because King Tone was an idol that was based on fear, and the only way to not be fearful is be more scarier than the boogeyman. And I don't want to be the boogeyman no more. It's not in me. I can't even try no more. Even when I'm angry, I say, you're not that dude anymore. So that's what I hope, that I could help every kid understand that your anger is based on fear. Your gangsterism is based on fear. So we could replace that with hope, and you don't have to be out there the way you think you are right now, because hope is better than fear.
In 2012, Trayvon Martin, an unarmed African-American teenager, was shot and killed by George Zimmerman. Zimmerman was acquitted of the murder charge, claiming self-defense. Hundreds of protests took place across the country and helped spark the Black Lives Matter movement, which is determined to fight racism.
Black Lives Matter!
I spoke with Los Angeles-based artist Nicholas Smith, who describes himself as an artivist. He combines his roles as an artist and activist. His work has appeared in books and movie posters, and his takes on racism and social justice have gone viral on social media. Describe for me your reaction when that story came out, and then how you were able to fuel all of that and use it as an instrument of activism through your art.
When Trayvon Martin was murdered, I feel like that was like really the catalyst for me. I was enraged, of course, mainly at the fact that, like, you know, if he had been any other race or whatever, wearing a hoodie, walking through that neighborhood, he probably would still be alive. But because of so many different, you know, fear tactics and, you know, obviously systemic racism and everything that's just been in our society, somebody looked at him and saw him as a threat. And so it was just unbelievable. And that weekend when, you know, his killer was found not guilty, there was a hoodie movement, people were marching in the streets. That was the weekend that Black Lives Matter officially began. Like, literally that weekend it was founded. And so I feel like if you had any sort of creativity and you were an activist, like, that was the moment to become an artivist, or, you know, to really, you know, combine the two and just go. And so I was actually talking to one of my college classmates from Hampton University, and we were just like talking about, like, what would it be like if even like historical figures of the past were, you know, part of this hoodie movement. And naturally, like, Martin Luther King Jr. is the first that comes to mind. I'm like, okay, it was really like one of the fastest art pieces that I've made, just like find an old image of MLK and a hoodie and Photoshop it together. And I put it out there on social media. I felt like the whole point of the piece was to say, like, you shouldn't judge anybody by their outward appearance. Like, does this image of Dr. King in a hoodie make you look down on him, or like look at him as less of a person because he's wearing a hoodie, the same hoodie that Mark Zuckerberg wears? Or, you know, it's a hoodie, like, it's an article of clothing, but you combine it with black skin and now it means thug, or it means, you know, criminal. With artivism, it's been an amazing journey, because not only can I use art for entertainment, or, like, you know, to get people to stop, but, like, once they stop, it's like, now I can teach them about this thing that just happened, or I can, you know, get them to contact their district attorney, or, you know, make a call, or, you know, add their name to this petition, do something. We all have these phones where we were looking at these screens, and, you know, we want to be able to help immediately. And, you know, a lot of times the artivism can help kind of steer people.
Amanda Nguyen is a sexual assault survivor and civil rights advocate. She's the founder of Rise, an organization that fights for sexual assault survivors worldwide.
To be very honest with you, when my journey in activism started, it was born out of rage. I was furious. I felt so betrayed by these ideals that I had grown up with, that America promised equality under the law, that survivors would have access to a process that promised us justice. And instead, I found this very broken system. In my case, I found out that Massachusetts, before my law was passed there, destroyed untested rape kits at 6 months, even if the statute of limitations was 15 years. And when I spoke up about this, I found out that, for instance, New York State also did this. 30 days, they destroyed rape kits untested. This was incredibly unfair. I found out that in some states, survivors don't have access to their patient medical records, don't have access to their police reports. And so as I began to share my story, I heard from survivors all around the country. And that's how we drafted the Sexual Assault Survivor Bill of Rights. When other people wrote in, and I realized that my story is not mine alone.
A bill to establish certain rights for sexual assault survivors and for other purposes.
The Sexual Assault Survivors' Rights Bill passed in 2016. It is only the 21st bill in modern U.S. history to pass unanimously in the U.S. Congress. The landmark legislation guaranteed survivors a rape kit and made it a requirement to preserve rape kits for the length of a case's statute of limitations.
The Survivors Bill of Rights Act of 2016 makes much-needed additions to federal law to give victims of sexual assault additional rights in seeking justice and recovering from their experiences.
It's always great when legislation's passed, but people don't know how the sausage is made. And I know what Washington's like. It's never easy, is it? I mean, talk to us about that climb. It's like climbing Mount Everest, isn't it?
It sure is. Gosh, it was a journey. This is 2016. It's a fully Republican Congress, and there's a Democrat who's president. And people said, "You're not going to make it happen." You know, this is a hyper-partisan Congress, and issues that shouldn't be partisan will become partisan. I said, "Thank you very much for your comment, but these are my own rights at stake." And so for this moment, I'm going to sit with people. Maybe I don't agree with them on everything, but I'm going to sit there and I'm going to practice what I like to call radical empathy, which is being in a space and seeing the humanity in someone when they might not see the humanity in you. That's how we got it through.
1 in 5 American adults have had a family member killed by a gun. That's according to a survey by the Kaiser Family Foundation. Among people of color, gun violence plays an even bigger role in their lives, with 1 in 3 Black adults saying they have personally witnessed a shooting. To understand how communities are affected by gun violence, I talked to activist and founder of the TraRon Center, Ryane Nickens. Nickens grew up in Ward 8, a neighborhood in southeastern Washington, D.C. In recent decades, this area has been plagued by drugs and gang violence. Ryane, maybe the best way to start is just kind of give us an idea of what it was like for you growing up in Ward 8. How would you describe it?
It's a mixed bag. So I would say that it was hell and heaven all at the same time. While life happened, and it happened early and it happened often for me, there was still a sense of community. I still had this family around me that loved me, community leaders and neighbors who supported me, teachers. So there was still this love around me, but there was still the pain of losing my sister, my brother, the pain of my mom being shot, of growing up, ducking and dodging bullets. That trauma was still there. So it was this heaven and this hell. And it seemed at times to be out of balance. Sometimes it felt like heaven. Sometimes it was strictly hell.
Mass shootings grab headlines in the U.S., but there's another gun violence story in America. Ryan's not alone. That's why her nonprofit, the TraRon Center, provides counseling and programs for adults and children affected by gun violence. People like her, who lived through the trauma of gun violence over and over again. Can you describe what it's like to live in your world where it doesn't seem like there's as much focus on it as there is on this other one, which gets more headlines?
Yeah, we cannot talk about, gun violence without talking about systemic racism. And this issue, and I know people always like to say, why do you all always play the race card? Because it's the hand we've been dealt, and that's what is in it. When we look at the last 4 decades, those being killed by guns were Black and brown people in underserved communities. And so it didn't mean anything. But then Sandy Hook happened. And you see the faces of these beautiful little white babies who went to school, simply was enjoying kindergarten and all of these in elementary school. And suddenly, that could have been your daughter. Suddenly, for some people, it awakens because they now see themselves in the victim. They now see how their child's life could have been robbed. That this isn't just isolated to ghettos and to hoods and to big cities. This is a problem. This is a huge problem.
Nikki Santos is the executive director at the Aspen Institute Center for Native American Youth. She's a member of the Coeur d'Alene tribe. Her work centers on empowering young people to take leadership roles and share their stories with a wider audience. The center offers programming to Native young people around mental health, including teen suicide prevention. Suicide is the second leading cause of death for Native American youth, ages 10 to 24. The current suicide rates among Native youth are 3.5 times higher than the national average. So mental health is such a broad term and it's an umbrella. What are some of the things you're hearing from these young people?
So Native youth are telling us about the impacts that suicide has had in their communities. They're talking about the lack of health resources that are available to them, culturally competent therapists. They're talking about access to culture because we know that culture is the biggest protective factor. The ability to use traditional plants and medicines, the ability to connect with land, we know has a profound impact on our mental health. Even today, when I'm getting stressed out, I always just go outside, breathe in that fresh air. But young people understand, Native youth understand intricately the cultural connection that we have to land and the power of place and how that connects us to our ancestors and the ones that walk before us. They also talk about the implications of erasure, race-based mascots, and more, and the profound impact that has on mental health, how that can increase anxiety, perception of value in community, and more. And so we know that when young people are able to identify not just the barriers and challenges, but also come to the table with solutions, we know that we're going to be able to move the needle in to hopefully decrease some of the disparaging data that's against Native youth.
Talked about healing. You also talked about resilience. And let me talk about a couple other R words. Remembrance and reckoning. And reckoning is important because that prevents it from happening again. Remembrance and reckoning still really hasn't happened here in the United States. And it's important. Both are important. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And that's something I speak on quite frequently, is that when we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, when we're talking about healing and transformation, we do have a collective truth that needs to be reckoned with. And I think as a society, we need to really wrap our minds around the true history. As you had talked about the Trail of Tears, there are countless other atrocities that have happened with Indigenous people that our nation needs to reckon with if we truly want to transform and heal and move together in a good way. And when I think about that, and I think about the power and the fight that our ancestors had, and knowing that their blood is within me to persevere, and it's within my daughter and the young people that we serve, I know the future is going to be bright. We can talk about erasure, we can talk about, the lack of reckoning, but I'd love to talk to you about the amazing things that young people are doing to create that change that they want to see.